we have finally reached the good bosses of Black Myth Wukong, and I'm happy to be here. We've gone through some dreadful, bad, mediocre, and alrighty bosses to get to this point. However, the very peak of this game is still a ways to go. So, let's go. Let's begin with Black Loong. Unlike the first Secret Dragon boss that's more of a swift beast, this one is a heavyweight brawler. Once I had fought Red Loong and heard that there are other colored Longs out there, I expected them to just be reskins, so this was a pleasant surprise to me. The Black Loong is a serviceable enough boss up until he does a rhythm-based ultimate move where you dance along drum beats that send out electrical rings. Then he becomes good because this is one of the coolest ultimate/desperation moves in this whole game. It's especially tricky because of how dodging in Wukong works. That is, without the perfect dodging, which doesn't work here. You can perform 3 rolls in quick succession, but after that, you have to pause for a beat. But with the pace of the drums sometimes increasing, you can't always afford those pauses, unless you roll in a direction that gives you just enough time to recharge the dodges. Or you can just stand on a rock and watch him do his solo. For being the one thing this boss has that makes him worthwhile, it's a damn shame it's easily skippable. And because of that, I have put him in number 33 instead of where we left off, which was 32. Because in quick hindsight and a replay of the fight, I think quote Tiger Vanguard unquote was fun enough to earn a spot here in the good tier. He appeared in the previous video in a lower spot, but I've decided to show him mercy. Number 31, WW.
I mean, who you figure that is, yeah? Woodrow Wilson? Willy Wonka?
Wondering why?
You got me.
This was the first real boss I fought in this game, and honestly I kinda wish I hadn't because he set my expectations for the following fights a little too high. Not because Wandering Wight is amazingly fun or anything, but because I like the design direction. He has a shit ton of combo mix-ups, from his foot stomp follow-ups altering, and those alterations also being different for each foot, to the arms wipes, and even to the shockwaves. I was hoping to see a little bit more of that for the major fights in the game when the first optional mini-boss had them, but after Chapter 1 they became more rare. I think mix-ups are really effective in making a very simple moveset have more depth and variety, and make it so the fight isn't just about memorizing the attacks, but fast reactions as well. And you can achieve this without even adding any new attacks, and just making the ones that are already there more dynamic. It can be substituted for with challenging moves, position checks, good flow, visual spectacle, and story and impact and all that stuff. All the things that this boss lacks. And that's why I appreciate the design more than I actually like the fight. Red Loong, on the other hand, I appreciate for its one-of-a-kind status in the game, but I also like the fight a decent bit. Having just mentioned my expectations for the other Longs in this game, one of the reasons I was convinced they would do that is because Red Loong lays out a solid groundwork for some solid reskins. Kind of like the first Frog, but better. I didn't think they would have this ultra-secret boss be a completely unique encounter, but clearly I underestimated game science. The boss is nicely animated, moves a good bit, but without becoming a chore to chase after like Kang-jin Long. But I say this boss is a good groundwork because it lacks challenge and any kind of oomph that a reworked version could have had. Something like the better frogs, which is number 29. Last video I created a separate spot for the frogs I didn't have quite as good of a time with, so now's the time to talk about those I did. Mainly the poison and fire variants, aka Bali Goo Ba and Ba Lang Lang. I think the lightning has some cool moves, as does the Hora Lu frog, but again that fight was bugged for me and apparently I'm not alone. If it works, it's quite good, some really cool attacks. I bet not everyone would agree on the poison frog being any good on account of said poison being nigh unavoidable, but I had a good number of anti-miasma powder. I mean, this is the poison chapter, so it made sense for me to stock up on it. Mostly what stood out was the answer to the question I had after killing Buddha's right hand. Where's the left hand? Oh, there it is. Lovely. Flame variant is another fireproof mantle fight, but I like what they did with the after effect explosions on many of the attacks, as well as the fireball spreading hops. Those are fun to dodge. So let me know which frog is your favorite. Is it Bali Goo Lung, Lungli Goo Ba, Lungli Goo Lung, Bali Goo Ba, Ba Lung Lung, or Lung Ba Ba? 28. Fastest wind, quickest fire, dumbest rocks, and ugly as sin. These two are a unique, interesting, and semi-well executed idea for a gank fight. One is a floating head that controls the wind, and the other is rolling around breathing fire. Should both elements come into contact, it can create fiery winds, and that's bad news for you. I think the rolling head is especially great with how it uses in-game physics instead of a movement animation. It causes his fire breath to spray in directions fully dictated by the physics. It makes him a great side enemy to a gank fight, but I think in order for this to really hit home, the other target would have to be much more aggressive and involved. The Windhead is neither. He mostly just yaps and flies around out of reach like an annoying gnat. It's extremely creative and a fun concept, which I'll give more points for than the actual combat experience. 27. Golden-Eyed Bishui. I believe Bishui at its core is a very good beast-type boss. It's hyper-aggressive, leaps around, but doesn't constantly disengage, and has a diverse moveset. But it's made difficult to beat and difficult to enjoy through fire effects, so excessive it made my game run like a paraplegic. There is a cool idea behind the increasingly overwhelming fires, however. You can actually just walk out of the fight at any point once the boss has created an opening in the cave walls. Proceed forward and Bishui will ambush you in another room without resetting his health. And you won't get to rest either. This too starts out pretty chill, no pun intended, but gets more and more chaotic over time. So you can regulate yourself how much you want or can deal with each element, and I think that's a really neat idea. It could have been better communicated though, I only knew I could do this because someone told me. If the performance was better and the arena gimmick was explained more clearly, I could see this boss being in great tier for sure. There's some fantastic looking animations here. 26. Emerald-Armed Mantis. In this encounter we get bored by Bajie. That alone could understandably make it the best boss ever for some people. And as far as I know, this isn't even a Guai but just an insect, who somehow is really fucking strong. So strong I fell to him more times than I can count. And I can count to at least 10. The damage this boss dishes out is out of this fucking world considering how swift he is. It makes me feel like the insect here. He's a filthy spammer and I kinda hate him, but I gotta give props for the bizarre setup and the little touches they added to it, such as Bajie screaming at you should you or the boss land a hit on the floor of his stomach. And best of all, the confirmation that Pigsy is vegan.
I'm not a meat eater after all.
Finally, we have good vegan representation. Too bad we made him eat a bug, or a tiny monkey if we die. Number 25 is a simple, straightforward duel that is just fun. Macaque Chief. He's your little arch nemesis throughout chapter 3, and every time he popped up, he made my experience a little bit better. First time, he shot it on me. Second time, he threw up on me. And third time, we were reunited inside Yellowbrow's big sack. And I'm counting this third encounter as part of the Macaque Chief experience, though it will also be taken into consideration when I talk about Yellowbrow himself. The presentation here is great thanks to him, but the fight is fun thanks to Macaque Chief, who, already possessing a pretty decent moveset, is now upgraded with plate projectiles and clones. I never really took the time to memorize any of this guy's moves because despite his exaggerated animations, they felt very intuitive to read. In a mini-boss, I think that's good. 24. Misty Cloud and Cloudy Mist. What the fuck even are these names? Should rather call them Dumb and Dumber. The dumb one is a spellcaster, Dumber is a pyromaniac, and together they're a solid duo. Less of an interesting concept than the fiery and windy heads, but better executed with some fun synchronized moves. They also let one another fight you solo for brief moments, and I like when they interject. Sometimes Dumber will count his own strikes up to 3, and other times Dumb will finish it for him. That's a really fun way to alter that attack. Their interactions is the best thing about this boss for me. There's quite a few bickering couples in this game, but these two had the funniest back and forth in my opinion. By the by, the run back to this boss is absolute fucking garbage. Continuing and finishing the chapter 5 trope of bickering duos is the boss with the worst name by far. Top takes bottom and bottom takes top. I hear this is something of a mistranslation and it should really be heaven takes earth and earth takes heaven, which sounds a lot more badass. This just sounds like a sex position. Fight itself is a neat concept with good execution. What previously seemed like just an animated trap ball turns out to be two guys with massive shields they can use as weapons and as sleds. or they can combine back together to go bowling around in one of the more boring ultimate moves, unfortunately. It goes on way longer than it remains fun. But I like the siblings taking turns and the camera automatically switching to the aggressive one. On top of that, they're pretty fun on their own. All in all, I really liked how Wukong handled gang fights in this game. As much of a massive FromSoft simp that I am, they could learn a thing or two from here. But on the topic of dull ultimates, Elder Jinchi is nearly unmatched. He becomes immune to damage and summons minions to funnel him health, so you must cull the herd as much as you can. Might sound exciting, but it's not. It just takes forever, breaks the pace, and puts me to sleep. However, these minions do add something else to this fight that I appreciate, and that's their suicide pact, which they try to make you join. The range of their self-detonations are actually very short, so if you just keep on the move while fighting the boss, you won't have to go on full defense. As Jinchi is a remix of Waltering Wight, he does share both his better qualities and his shortcomings. Good amount of mix-ups, but those individual moves themselves aren't super fun. If a rematch with the fat pinhead doesn't interest you, at least it's well worth doing for the many a time mentioned Fireproof Mantle. Good thing that for a secret boss this one isn't too hard to find, but I do still lament obscuring such a vital tool behind an optional bell hunt. 21. Whiteclad Noble. This boss is half man, half serpent, half great, half ass! First phase is awesome, he's a huge increase in mobility, speed, combo length, and challenge from all prior encounters in Chapter 1. Some could say a bit too much. Whiteclad Noble has combos so fast you can only avoid them with perfect dodges, or by outspacing them. Hitting him is harder than any boss before him, and most after him, as he can quickly pull back. There's a slow roll catch move in phase 1 that becomes an instant attack in phase 2, so that's gonna fuck with your brain, and he's got some combo alterations up his sleeve. This is stuff I like, but it's quite a lot for such an early fight. But regardless of where the water-loving man is found, I think he's great. Then he becomes a snake and abandons his elegant dance moves to mostly do singular attacks with weird tails, if any. Like doing a tail whip when said tail is underwater. What the fuck happened here? It's odd, it's awkward, and wasn't really even necessary when the fight that started this was so solid. But I guess he felt the need to water it down. Pun intended! Number 20, non-white. As a white person, I find this appalling. Dude's even wearing white face. Well, let me add some more white on his face because here comes my glazing session for this boss. He's the first boss to utilize a block posture system, and I like its effect on the flow of the fight. You gotta be quick on your feet the moment he parries you so you don't get hit by his counterattack. When he's on the offense, he's among the quicker enemies in the game with some cool ice eruptions and dirty tricks up his sleeve. He'll retreat for a moment at half health in the first fight, and come back with a new set of tricks once posture broken or damaged enough. Now he'll play even dirtier, using poison, unnatural movements, and trail effects on his moves. But most surprisingly, he has a noteworthy soundtrack. As a result, he's definitely the best presented of the many nons. I don't think there's a whole lot of depth to his moveset, but it is very enjoyable. 19. Mad Tiger. I could see any boss from this point onwards, maybe even a couple points backwards, being great tier worthy adversaries. I'm super strict to make sure those I do put up there stand apart. And Mad Tiger having a mini-boss theme and an unceremonious ending doesn't do that. And that's despite the most obscure quest in the game leading up to it. So the question is it worth it? As long as you're not gonna try solving it on your own without looking it up, sure. He's got really fun, impactful, dangerous combos, he can use the floor and the walls of his cave as playthings, and he's given nice little animation details like cracking his knuckles and having visible neck pains following his excessive ground shattering. Small touches I believe are worth pointing out, especially in the light of the mockery and notria the last song has subjected itself to. 18. Zhu Bajie. Have I made it clear I like the little pig man? I probably have.
Chubby one!
But he's not so little in this fight where he's lost his wits and attacks us in a mud pool that limits our mobility in similar fashion to Taoist Master. Thankfully it doesn't cut your stamina in half, and I think the moves you have to deal with are fair enough to work in this hampered state. His most interesting abilities are turning into a poop fish, poop rhino, and of course his spore form. I feel with the ingredients here you could make the most delicious soup imaginable, but they kinda goofed on the order of mixing them. He has too many ultimate moves and he uses them too often. He has a back and forth charge as a boar, a long dance with the fish form, which by the way is the yin yang fish, and a stampede with poop rhinos. who are also probably the Golden Rhino. I actually like all of these, but I also like his regular moveset as either his base form or Big Boar, from the very little I got to see of it. But most of the time was spent on doing these super long attacks, longest of which I counted as being 45 seconds in total. After which you get a massive damage window before he goes back to doing it again. If he does it twice, which he has, that's a minute and a half. Oh, and in case you ask, I did count his brief fight right before this as part of the Zhu Bajie boss. An appetizer before a soup that had it all, but they forgot to stir. Number 17, Black Wind King. This is another surprisingly complex Chapter 1 boss with some lengthy attack strings, gotcha moves, and teleport variations he can pull on his existing combos. I like these a lot because it rewards memorizing how these combos normally end. As for his Wisp form, I like it a lot until the landing strike, which is super slow and easily avoided. But the little spark indicating dodge timing is nice. If you're too close to the Wisp, you won't have time to react to it, so in those instances you just need to get away. So it's not just about reacting, but also positioning. Other than that, just a solid duel. 16. Non-Able. Well, sadly I won't be able to make ableist jokes, as it turns out he's very much able of kicking my ass, even with hands tied behind his back, and even more so once he breaks fully free. Before that, he's a kick and stomp king. Fun combos, and even a few mix-ups. Those carry on to phase 2, where in addition he gains the upper hand with punches that send out energy or G or whatever this is, and they're a great fun to put to use yourself when inhabiting his spirit. I'd rather not adorn his fucking droopy earlobes though. His presentation is lackluster compared to his non-white brother, but you can excuse that for a Yaksha Chief. I think the only thing holding him back is how he tends to take lengthy pauses in between every attack. Great moveset, not so great flow. Number 15, Green-Capped Martialist. I could see myself regretting some of these good tier placements later down the line because many of these are just on the cusp of greatness for me, and a replay or two, or giving it some time, could potentially give them that boost. For the time being, the two downsides that brought the Hula Hoop Martialist down for me are 1, his defense, or rather lack thereof, and 2, the singular hula hoop time waste attack. I like when there's 2 of them because then it's actually a little more challenging, but 1 by itself is a bore. I just want to get back to fighting the guy, that's where the fun is. I think adding a retraction effect to his throwing abilities adds a nice wrinkle to his fighting style, especially because he can do these even at close range. And then he can set them on fire, multiply them, parry you, and teleport with quick follow-ups. One needing an instant dodge and another catching you if you do. Come to think of it, this might be the last Yaksha Chief in this ranking, or at least the last one I would consider a mini-boss. And thus, the best one. At number 14 is Scorpionlord. This placement might lead to some spicy comments because it seems he has captured the hearts of many gamers looking for a worthy challenge, and that's what he is. But it's just not quite my type of boss. To me, this is a memorization-based boss. He starts out with somewhat lengthy but manageable combos, then he starts adding more and more follow-ups at certain thresholds. The follow-ups are always the same and weirdly enough animated with quick and delayed tells that I can't simply react dodge them. I have to remind myself what the entire course of his death sting dance is every time he starts it in later stages. I don't think it's a very enjoyable learning experience, and I won't be kept company by good music or any kind of coolness factor while I'm at it. This is one of the mini-boss themes that I couldn't tell you how often play throughout the game because most of them sound the same to me. It's one of those tracks that goes doing, and I hate them. Sorry to keep shitting on the music, but if I'm gonna keep praising the animations, I think it's only fair I voice what I don't like as well. Because while he's quite hard to read for me, I do like those animations here once more. Especially with how his tail or claw will glow to indicate which he's about to attack with. While I didn't enjoy learning it much, what I believe matters most for a memorization fight is how it feels once you have. It feels good. At 13 is Black Bear Guai, the return of the king. This time he's a big fat bear on fire and kinda looks like a Kung Fu Panda villain. And on the topic of music from last entry, I like this one. But while I liked his previous Wisp form attacks, I can't say the same here. This time you can't rely on the spark for the timing and instead have to battle against depth perception, which isn't easy when we're talking about a formless entity. and it just keeps going and going and going. This game really is 50-50 with its desperation moves. Some are great, some suck. But when he comes out of it, you have a really fun brawl against a giant foe, who despite being tall enough to be half of the frame, is still readable, at any range. Bit less complex than his human form maybe, but much more cool, more impactful, better animated. Aside from his droopy jaw, I don't know what the fuck is going on there. If it wasn't for that one shitty attack, he could secure a spot among the greats. Number 12, and the last of the good tier fights, Tiger Vanguard, without quotation marks. Well, hey, speaking of Kung Fu Panda villains, I think that actually added to the vibe of this boss because he looks like he could be from a children's movie, but is contrasted by this blood and gore pool and his desire to eat your brain. Made him feel honestly kind of intimidating along with his movements. It's like he could go much harder if he wanted to, but he wants to play with his food first. He's sort of a mix of his father with the sword and Mad Tiger with the brawn. And the first enemy to use Rock Solid, which he has a fun trick with where he can leave its shell to ambush you from elsewhere. Since he's more slow and deliberate, I would have liked him to have a couple more combo alterations to throw you off. It's not a memorization, positioning, or a reaction check fight, and instead it's just, I don't know, just cool? But with that, let's climb atop the mountain of great bosses. My first pick among the greats of this game is the second half of the secret Erlang fight where we both turn into Colossi and have an all-out brawl atop mountains. Or rather, we become mountains, even bigger than that. And that's the 4 Heavenly Kings and Erlang Shen. This is the coolest and best spectacle boss quite possibly ever. Sure, that might be all it is, but when it's this good and it's what they were going for, is it not worth all the praise? The 4 Kings do have some genuinely well-designed synchronized moves together, so it's a little bit of a shame that there is zero threat of dying here with your life leech ability. This isn't a challenge or even really a fight, but I also wouldn't really call it an interactive cutscene because you do have a fair bit of agency. It's more like playing with digital toys and feeling like a little kid, and I mean that in a good way. It's sprinkled with cutscenes all throughout and it becomes hard to tell when something is scripted to happen and when it's all just seamlessly worked into the battle. I think the best part was getting to strangle one of the kings with a fucking dragon. That's the biggest power trip you could possibly give. Erlang Shen, who you've grown accustomed as being an elegant spear-wielding dancer, is now a fat, mountain-sized, brawling brute of a tiger.
Chubby one!
He can use lightning as a whip, shoot thunder from his bow, his head, swing around a sword coated in fire, and a lightning axe. Everything just feels so goddamn cool I can't even put it to words. It's something you just have to see, not have it described for you. And after all the massive explosions, thunder, and blows to the face from 2 giants, the most satisfying, impactful strike of them all was just a simple bitch punch to the cheek in our real form in the aftermath. Moving on to number 10, Stone Monkey. Contrary to the 4 Kings, this is the first half of the final boss, but also worthy enough of being counted as its own boss fight. This time not for coolness factor alone. I like how after this long boat ride of build up to the finale and a beautiful arena, the final boss is just an unglamorous monkey with no name. Obviously it's Wukong, but not really. He has no mind. It just felt really appropriate. However, unglamorous doesn't mean he doesn't get to be cool, because turns out even in this state, he's a master of all elements, being able to create earthquakes, rings of fire that seem to span the entire fucking globe before returning, and frost that he can use in similar vein to Tiger Vanguard to create a decoy and an ambush should you attempt to take advantage of his seemingly compromised state. So mindless or not, his AI is actually pretty good at countering you. But the best part of all this is his self-duplication. Just out of nowhere in the middle of this fight he creates the best gank in the entire game. It's closest to being similar to the top and bottom siblings of taking turns, but much cooler. It's so good that it makes him on his own feel lesser after experiencing it, and that's the only negative. I want more of it, less of the solo fight, as rock solid as it is. Number 9, Kang-jin Star. It infamously, according to IGN, took until Chapter 3 for Wukong to feature a female character, whose corpse gets spat on right after, but I'd say it was well worth the wait because she's among the better spellcaster bosses I can think of. Why? Because she's just really cool. She's constantly raising the stakes and changing the look and feel of the fight, from being a spellcaster duel to a spectral dragon who summons similar lightning pillars as in her own boss fight, but now they're a little more dangerous and less boring. Then doing a lightning nuke, summoning thunder that dyes her hair, darkens the skies, and summons a soundtrack that finally matches with the scope of what's going on. And in between every big spectacle attack is just a fun, fast-paced fight. She has all the best qualities of the spell users that came before her, not letting you stunlock her to death, but also not constantly fleeing. She keeps you on your feet without a dull moment in sight. Not to mention the fight takes place on top of a giant turtle, and ends with you finally meeting Pig Bro. No better reward, really. Number 8 is Yellowbrow and all his many wacky scenarios. While Kang-jin Star among spellcasters, Yellowbrow is one of the greatest gimmick bosses I have encountered. First part not so much, just a brief introduction before he stuffs you inside his seed sack, as he calls it. And here we get the third and final fight against Macaque Chief alongside our partner in crime. Fun fight and a one-of-a-kind backdrop for it. But if you thought things wouldn't get weirder than the seed sack, we then become the Macaque Chief ourselves and get put into a miniature set of a palace where we smash our way through miniature monks while getting stronger and stronger, before being once more humbled by Yellowbrow. Damn, I really wanted to make him suck Macaque. But now he's not only Yellowbrow, but yellow in his entirety, and can only be harmed by heavy attacks. We do see this being done a few more times after, but never as well as this. And I think that's because he's not too mobile or fast, so you can find windows where landing these strikes is possible. Sort of like Yom the Giant, but instead of having a weapon you've never used before, you have all the answers already in your toolkit. And it's about learning how to best use it, like utilizing light jump attacks that don't stagger you, focusing on just perfect dodges, consumables, or whatever you can think of. And I thought that was wonderful. As a fight, he's not the most exciting outside this gimmick, but I do really like his giant flail and how in the final phase it can wrap around him to hit you. Yellowbrow is one of the reasons why this game felt more than just a series of mediocre fights back to back. It was creative as hell and a wild ride. 7. Yellow Loong. I feel the localization in this game is really bad in some places, and naming this guy Yellow Loong is a prime example. You could just call him Golden Dragon, that's what it means. Instead, he's a long piss, but maybe that's also fitting because this was a long fight that pissed me off. However, I think this is the best done memorization fight, if you'd consider it one. Like Scorpionlord, he builds on top of his existing combos to eventually create a series of attacks with no end in sight. You'll have to learn to get your hits in during these dances, and not just rely on the pauses in between. This is reinforced by him being able to dodge your heavy attacks at his neutral stance. While I generally prefer the type of bosses with a variety of mix-ups and less scripted sequences, you can see the upside of these scripts by watching what perfecting them looks like from the likes of Ongball. Wukong's fantastic combat system allows you to create your own variety in how you take him on, and he's among the better foes to put it to the test. Also, exploding lightning is just really cool, and I love the use of colors in this fight. So even to someone who is not Ongball, I still enjoyed it. Coming in at number 6, Yin Tiger. This guy is just a random blacksmith you can challenge to a duel, and he turns out to be an absolute monster who can cleave the earth in two. Why does this fight exist? I don't know, but I'm fucking glad it does. He has some of the heftiest feeling strikes in the game, so hefty they put the game in slow motion. And it's not a performance issue for once, but a stylistic choice, and I approve. Its positives are mostly shared by Yellow Loong, so I won't repeat everything I said there and just say, this boss is badass and cool and fun, and his attacks feel the best to dodge out of every boss in the entirety of Wukong. Number 5 is another yellow boss, Yellow Wind Sage. While I haven't had any big complaints so far about my great tier picks, I'll sadly have to break the streak here. With Bajie's fight they had the ingredients for a great boss but kinda fumbled it. Here they had the ingredients for an amazing S tier boss, but then threw in an awful wind effect and obscured the best part of the fight behind bullshit and weak health. He has 3 phases, first is alright, second is good, third is amazing, but you either won't get to see much of it because either you physically can't see it due to the sandstorm, or you nullify it with the Wind Tamer and just destroy him before he can recover. The sandstorm creates barriers for you that don't affect the boss, and he can willy-nilly jump back and forth between the combat zone and off limits. I think that sucks. Wind Tamer is kinda necessary to enjoy this, but I found this boss way before the secret area of the desert where you obtain it. So I replayed it with the Wind Tamer on another playthrough and let him show off his moveset in this part, and to my shock, it's actually one of the best in the game. He has some badass teleport combos and mix-ups on par with some of the endgame fights. If you have the chance to use the Wind Tamer here, don't immediately rush him down, and you might have a blast with a genuinely top tier fight. But it's locked behind too many ifs for me to rank it higher than this. However, there's still plenty to enjoy prior to that, particularly with one of the coolest attacks in the game where the yellow wind sage summons the husk of Fuban to dive at you. Again, I hadn't fought Fuban on its own yet, so this was a jaw-drop moment. He then uses the confusion and upheaved sand to do a follow-up ambush, so even mechanically it's good. Funniest part though was when I realized what happens to the giant head he's carrying when he throws it away. It just sits there. Number 4, Yaksha King. Okay, Yellow Wind Sage might have the coolness factor for that one attack, but Yaksha King and Red Boy have that for every single fucking move. And yes, I count both as part of the same battle. Localization has absolutely butchered this child. Could have named him Scarlet or Crimson Child, but no, Red Boy. However, this little man is not kidding around with his flamethrower spear. Lots of moves with lingering hitboxes and fire left on the ground, so this is a nice position-based fight, as long as you don't stun lock him. Coolness factor alone could have brought this boss up pretty high, but they didn't stop there and gave both portions of this encounter a good moveset. Red Boy more in its speed and agility, and Yaksha King more in its sheer impact. I know I keep saying one of the coolest or one of the best, but it can't be helped because it must be stated that this is one of the coolest looking bosses probably ever. I love how the spikes from the ground don't just disappear, they float up in the sky like feathers or flowers. It's really pretty. Yaksha King is a little static in my opinion, despite being able to at times backflip and even run up a cliff, but outside of those he's not too crazy. Still, I found plenty of challenge in learning his big arm blade combo. If we count that as an ultimate, it's definitely one of the best. Also, I know I have to mention the music because it does stand out for being wildly different from anything else. Now, as the real Magi fans know, there's one more tier above Great, which is reserved for the absolute best of the best. And that's where we'll find the top 3. Number 3, Supreme Inspector. Imagine combining Azai Nagamasa, Kasha, and Tate Eboshi, all from Nioh 2, to create a boss that only takes the very best aspects of each and dials it up to 11. If you've never played Nioh 2, let me be more specific. The Inspector uses his wings as a parry shield, which enables several different counterattacks, as well as the use of feather projectiles. He'll then hop on a flaming unicycle in an attempt to ride you down, and as for the Tate Eboshi connection, I guess just red attacks and being fucking awesome. There is one big downside to the unicycle though, which is the lingering flames on the ground. I don't think it was necessary to add position checks that are hard to spot when the moveset carries the fight at the top on its own. But you know what? I don't even care. I just tank it because it's a tiny drop of negative in a sea of positives. Sure, I did say it's a big downside, but how big is a truck versus a mountain? Also, this boss along with Yellowbrow have unavoidable face transition moves that can damage you, which obviously isn't ideal, but again, truck versus mountain, I don't care. I think my favorite part is how you can switch between riding the unicycle and staying grounded, and he keeps doing it completely seamlessly. On top of that, cool animations, good visuals, massive attack variety, and mechanics that make the combat of this game shine. That's why I didn't like 100-Eyed Daoist. He felt like he made a great combat system feel worse. But this boss, this gives you so many opportunities to make the best of it. I love it. Oh, by the way, I heard that they fixed 100-Eyed Daoist Master, but I haven't done it since then. Maybe it's okay now. I don't know. Number 2, the Great Sage's Broken Shell. With this placement, you now know my favorite boss in the game, but it was probably already obvious from all my prior comments. But I know for many this is their preferred boss. Understandably. It's the final boss of the game and comes right after Stone Monkey, who manages to reform into Wukong to an extent. It will soon become very apparent that all the skills you have been leveling up are just a weak imitation of the lengths he can go to. Literally. His staff is bigger than yours. Deal with it, scrub. Like Stone Monkey, landing heavy attacks won't come easy, and he can even dodge light attacks, as well as force you away with his Ring of Fire. Once you think you might have him beat, he steals the essence of the relics you've collected, comprised of his 6 senses he had lost. It doesn't mean he's back, but you can definitely see the return of his personality when he can now steal your healing gourd, humiliate you and make you get back up to continue the fight, eat right in front of you and toss the leftovers in your face, and stuff like that. He doesn't have a single line of dialogue, yet tells you everything about himself. I did find some of these unskippable interactions annoying after a while, but they can be avoided with careful play, so in essence they're good. So how good of a fight is this monkey just purely gameplay-wise? 10 out of 10, one of the best of all time. I genuinely think he shits on at least 99% of FromSoft's best bosses and every single non-FromSoft boss I have done. He's a combo mix-up king, keeps you on the move non-stop, a great subversion of mechanics you've grown accustomed to in this game, has a really smart AI that takes your behavior into account for everything that he does. And I just love dodging that iconic staff of his. A masterpiece of a boss fight, and I can't believe there's a boss ranked above him. But that's because Erlang, the sacred divinity, exists. First Fight exists too, but not really worth ranking separate because it's a weaker version of this without the risk of dying. But atop Meijin Peak, the risk of dying has never been greater. I didn't defy the odds for 5 hours straight, and it was 5 hours well spent. Since then I've spent at least 5 or more hours just having fun and getting better, but even in my most recent fight I still saw him do combinations of attacks I have never seen him do before. The duel is split in 3 parts. First is the training. It's very mild compared to what comes after, but very crucial you get used to. Here you'll learn he can block and parry you, dodge your heavy attacks, say no to being immobilized, do a sweeping laser to cut down your clones, and even respond to your transformations with one of his own while commenting on your choice of form.
Yellowbrow's descend in choosing disciples. Accelerate. Survive or fall soon if you're not.
That's just so fucking badass, god damn it. So how do you land hits on this guy? Well, his posture can eventually break, leading him to become easy to stun lock. Outside of that, just gotta hit him during his combos, use see-through abilities, quick heavies when possible, or by doing jump attacks to simultaneously dodge and punish. Harsh to learn maybe, but absolutely exhilarating once you start getting the hang of it. As for his offensive capabilities, they're off the charts. He has a spear, a sword and an axe, and he can change their size and quantity to suit his needs. It makes for visually striking attacks and gives him variety unlike any other boss. Combo-wise, he goes completely insane in his final phase, which thankfully is the longest part of the fight. Remember the combo chart I made earlier? This is roughly what that would look like for Erlang. It's not just that almost every attack has different finishing moves, but rather he can chain together one combo to another, then branch off somewhere completely else, then cancel the combo with a backstep slash and kick his sword at you, only he can alter the speed of the kick and then go off to do another combo from that. Is it infuriating? Absolutely not. You have all the answers in your toolkit if you want to interrupt his combos or get hits in during them. That's what this game is about. Many of his combo alterations depend on not just RNG, but your position and your distance. For example, he can assume this mid-air spear stance. If I stay away, he will often either do a quick charge or send his dogs at me, but if I try getting closer, he can change it to a spear spin move and catch me off guard. That principle goes for the majority of his moves, where he perfectly adjusts to what you're doing. It's just addictingly fun. When a boss that can last almost 10 minutes feels like it's over too soon, you know it's a fucking good boss. And it breaks my heart to see so many people complain about it being bullshit. The only thing I've noticed being unfair is his rare iframe ignoring spear slash. It can be perfect dodged and outspaced, but I do agree it's bullshit. Again, my truck versus Mount Everest analogy. I get this level of challenge isn't for everyone, but if this type of complaining ends up stopping bosses like this being made, then fuck you! Because I genuinely believe, purely gameplay-wise, this is the greatest boss I have ever fought. We'll see how time will affect its overall placement among my favorites, but I don't think my love for it will ever be extinguished. So how does Wukong's boss roster stack up? There were a lot of stinkers and forgettable fights, and my biggest universal complaint is the performance on PS5. I only mentioned it for Bishui because that's where it was at its worst, but was present all throughout. Still, I can't believe there's this amount of interesting, creative and well-detailed encounters in a single game. And the best boss of all time if you ask me, and it's in the same game as the stolen boss from Elden Ring. What the fuck? But I think all of the great tier bosses are bordering on amazing tier, even those ranked at the bottom of it. I can't say this is one of my favorite games of all time, but for giving some of the best bosses and experiences of all time, I am extremely grateful. And I'm also thankful you watched this long ass ranking. At one point I was going to do just top 10 best and top 10 worst, So hey, give me some credit I didn't go for the easy, lazy choice. It only felt appropriate because neither did Black Myth Wukong.